Hi, welcome back to my channel, Solitary and Unsustained. If you're new here, my name's Sarah. If not, welcome back. Today I will be doing a very small December wrap-up and a little bit of a haul now that Christmas is done. Okay, so first, with the December wrap-up, the first book that I finished in December that I actually listened to on audiobook was The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell, which I actually just recently talked about in my little vlog where I went around DC. About a girl named Libby Jones who's living in England and has just turned 25. She has just found out on her 25th birthday that she has inherited a huge mansion in this very wealthy part of England when she had no idea that she would be getting it. She never really has any recollection of living in this mansion because she's actually adopted and it belonged to her birth parents that have this really mysterious history and have died when she was a baby, and there's all sorts of mystery around her origins and her family and all sorts of people that you learn about throughout this book. It's really just like sort of a thriller mystery, and it was a really interesting read that had a lot of good twists and turns. My one critique of this book is that there are a lot of different characters and we don't really learn enough about every single character to understand their motives, even characters that influence really big plot points in this story, and I would have liked to have learned a little bit more about them, specifically through their actions, instead of just the author saying, oh, this person was charismatic, or oh, this person did this. Like, I would have liked the author to kind of prove this through more information about those characters besides just giving them these kind of general adjectives. But yeah, so that was book number 1. Then book number 2, I read Severance by Ling Ma. I started this book out as an ebook on Libby, but then ended up listening to the audiobook as well. This is about Candace Chen, who is like millennial age, living in New York City. She's working at this publishing company that she doesn't feel super passionate about, and she's working in the Bible department, basically distributing Bibles and working on different production involving that, and she's not super engaged with what she's doing, but it makes enough money for her to live in New York City. While she's doing this and like navigating relationships and things, this virus that is from a certain area in China ends up creating a pandemic that sort of produced like these zombies, but like they don't hurt other people besides infecting other people. And it's just kind of a dark satire, very relevant to the fact that we are going through COVID right now. It kind of follows her as she's working and navigating the onset of this pandemic, and then later how she has to kind of leave New York City and figure out how to survive and deal with the fact that other people are getting sick. Yeah, so this was also a really interesting book. It definitely has a mundane sort of atmosphere while also kind of being satirical. Some of the themes in this book like made really interesting comments on capitalism and consumerism, particularly in the time of crisis, and how a lot of like American values of, you know, consumerism and like marketing and then like the economy put that over actual human needs and values, especially how we have a lack of empathy for other countries facing these sorts of things when they're not affecting us. But then once we are, you know, have the potential to be affected or are beginning to be affected, then things come to a halt and we shed light on whatever's going on. I don't know if that made any sense, but yeah. My next book that I read was Circe by Madeline Miller. This was a really good book. Basically, Circe is another Greek retelling. Madeline Miller did the Song of Achilles, which I enjoyed for the most part. Like, the ending was really good. Check out my other video where I illustrate a scene from the Song of Achilles. Harmless self-promo. Anyway, it starts all the way from the beginning of Circe's life. Circe is born from the Titan Helios and the Naiad Perse, who is a daughter of another Titan, Oceanos. Essentially, Circe is like kind of the odd one out in her family. She has other brothers and sisters. She's like least liked and is most abnormal to them. That sort of feeds into her origins of admiring like mortal kind of subjects versus the divinities that she was born from. And so looking at them, you know, as an outcast from her family and looking at them for love and support and things throughout her whole life, and also admiring mortality versus her kind of divinity. On top of that, I don't know if this is a spoiler, Circe, she turns out to be a witch. And like a whole family, like all her siblings are able to do witchcraft, and it's called like Pharmacus. She ends up getting exiled for something that she did. She lives on this island with like lions that are like her trusty kind of sidekick family type things, and all these other sorts of animals, and then encounters all these other people like Odysseus and everybody, and has all these different little sort of quests, or sort of quests. It's like other people go on quests and then come to her island for help, and so she's obviously on this island like the entire book. And so that's my one critique. It's like it does feel a little repetitive. It's like other people go have adventure and then come back to the island and are like, Circe, help me out, or Circe, I don't want to be here, or I don't know. I almost want to compare this to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, because it kind of captures how like long and isolating life can be, and like how she is sort of watching everyone else live while she is cursed with immortality, when like other divinities thrive having all this time to do all these adventures and all these things. Yeah, so like in the end, her biggest conflict was the fact that she was immortal. And then there were just like a few things that I just felt like weren't needed. I wish there was more of kind of a pinnacle to the story. It did feel like a lot of different short little adventures all kind of crammed together, which is a lot different from The Song of Achilles, which has a lot more of a novel structure. But yeah, I thought this was a good book. It had great atmosphere, really good prose. For that, I would recommend it, but it's not super structured in a typical novel sort of way. Yeah. The next one I read was Peter Pan. It actually was two stories, Peter and Wendy, and Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens, which I counted as two. Peter and Wendy, loved it. Whimsical, magical. I love the live action version from like 2003. A lot of it was the same. That's actually a really good adaptation for everything. If you take it at face value as like a fun adventure, I loved it. It is a little sad. Apparently the author had like a really tough upbringing in terms of wanting to get attention from his mother versus his brother who had just died, and the mother like favored and grieved over, and then the author was forgotten and kind of unworthy replacement for the dead brother. And so it kind of contributes to Peter Pan's feelings of not being worthy for a mother and to like go on living as other children. It's really sad if you look into that part, but once again, if you take it at the face value, kind of whimsical niceness of it, really good. Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens. The only good part about that to me was you get to find out Peter Pan's origins, where he like escaped to Kensington Gardens and then got locked out by his mother. That's like the only good part. There's not much of a plot. There's actually repetitive moments from the Peter and Wendy story. Like the whole Wendy and Peter relationship is repeated with someone named like Mamie or Marmee or something. I don't know, it just kind of ends with this weird warning for children to not stay after dark in Kensington Gardens or else they'll die from the cold. And Peter will make tombstones for them. It was a little weird. But the first story, fantastic. Loved it. Great. So now we will move on to the haul portion of this video. This is a mix of books that I received from people from Christmas, and then also a few books that I bought from like a gift card that I had for a while, and I was like, ooh, let's buy some books. So yeah, here we go. First we'll start with Test of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This is a classic. I don't really know very much about it. Someone gave this to me, but it looks interesting. It's about Tess Durbeyfield, who, because of her family's impoverished situation, she is forced to claim kinship with this wealthier family and ends up meeting someone named Alec, who apparently is her downfall and I guess she's kind of falls for. but she's also forced to decide whether or not to reveal secrets of her past or just move on and hope that things don't become complicated. I don't really know. It should be good though, I guess. Then we have All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I think this is somewhat of a historical fiction book. It follows our characters Marie-Laure Leblanc, who is living with her father in Paris. When she's 12, Nazis end up occupying Paris, which forces them to move in with a great uncle. And then in Germany, we have our character Warner, who happens to be an expert at building and fixing things, ends up listening to this radio, and I think they might communicate with Marie-Laure Leblanc at some point, and two people kind of connecting from these two sides of this war and finding humanity in each other, as far as I can tell. We'll see. It looks good. Then we have The Book of Lost Names by Kristen Harmel. This book also is historical fiction taking place during World War II. It's about Ava Traub Abrams, who was forced to evacuate Paris. Once she evacuates, she actually finds refuge in this small town and ends up forging identity documents for young Jewish children fleeing to Switzerland. But through a means of preserving their identities so that they could one day remember where they came from, she creates this book of lost names, basically of the children's original names, and finds it years later and apparently left something in this book that was like a final message, and she's not sure if she's ready to recover all of her memories from that time. So, it looks interesting. Then we have The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. And it's about Linus Baker, who is a caseworker, sort of like a magical CPS. He's sent on this special mission to essentially discover whether or not these 6 children are dangerous for their magical qualities. It's supposed to be like really whimsical, sweet. I've heard a little bit of controversy around this book, but I wanted to read it first before I really understood what was going on with that. But it does seem really sweet. I hope that the controversy does not ruin it for me. So today I actually went shopping and got 3 books. The first one is Dune by Frank Herbert. I watched the movie and I kind of liked it. I'd like to find out what happens. It's considered like a classic sci-fi fantasy book. From what I remember, basically it's about a boy named Paul Atreides and his family who moved to this desert planet named Arrakis. Paul's father had been appointed sort of a governing position on this planet to take care of the kind of economy surrounding a specific resource called spice, which for locals on this planet is like very sacred and used for a variety of medicinal and sacred things, while everyone else who do not live on Arrakis use it as a fuel source. Spice lays on top of the sand. It's a very abundant resource in this area, but the locals allow people to harvest spice while also kind of resenting this governing organization that sort of control everything on this desert planet. Yeah, it just seems really interesting. Basically, there's these rumors that come around that Paul Atreides is going to be this savior for the locals on this planet, but essentially things go awry. There's murder, there's plots of sabotage and misled intentions, I don't know, and things kind of go about from there, from what I understand. It looks good. Then I got Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. This is an autobiography by Michelle Zauner, who is an indie rock musician named Japanese Breakfast, which I don't know anything about, but I've heard this autobiography is very moving as it deals with themes about grief and family and identity, and it's just supposed to be a really sort of touching story. Yeah, that's sort of all I know about it, but it looks good. I think it should be very sweet, and maybe it'll make me cry. We'll see. Our last book is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is actually part of a series, and we'll see if I end up getting through the series. It's a Romeo and Juliet reimagining and sort of historical fiction that takes place in Shanghai. And that's really all I know. And that's probably all you need to know, because most people know Romeo and Juliet, sort of dueling families. I hope it's good. People talk about it all the time. It's supposed to be good, right? So we'll see. I treated myself to a hardback cover, so yay me. And yeah, so this has been all the books that I've either read in December or acquired in December. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any thoughts about any books that I've talked about. And yeah, I hope I see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.